Good afternoon, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. Let's talk de-dollarization. It's been a very hot topic over the last year, especially the last few months. Everybody is talking about how there is this huge push to get out of the dollar. Nobody wants the dollar. The BRICS nations are taking over, going to set up their own, international currency trade. And a lot of people get this feeling that the dollar is not wanted. Like, everybody is trying to just get out of the dollar and just not touch it again. But that's not the case. The dollar is very strong and there is a huge demand for it. In fact, the demand for dollars is so strong that people are now hoarding them to the point that there is a shortage of dollars, and that's really what's taking place. See, take a look at Argentina. I'm going to leave the links down in the description. This is coming out of Yahoo Finance. I believe it was a reposting of a Business Insider article. Anyway, it has this to say: Argentine companies are increasingly turning to Chinese yuan amid dollar shortages. See, it says US dollars are a growing rarity in Argentina, pushing many people into the yuan. See, this is the real problem. People are like, no, man, I'm not giving up my dollars. I want dollars. Let's use yuan. That's a lesser currency anyway. So they hold on to dollars. Dollar shortages begin to take place, and now nobody knows what to do as far as doing trade. The country's central bank's dollar reserves are at their lowest level, right? Even U.S. companies like Whirlpool may join them because of the lack of dollars. See, this isn't a flood. If you would think hyperinflation, that means there's more dollars than people know what to do with, right? But you go over to Argentina and there is a shortage of dollars that has taken place. We have to think the dollar is a world reserve currency and people are now hoarding those dollars. They don't want to give them up. It is the stronger currency, or else they would be getting rid of those, right? The idea of this de-dollarization, meaning that nobody wants the dollars, that's not accurate. Just look at Argentina right now. Argentina has been in discussions for dollar aid from the IMF. Now, this is something that's really interesting. Because of the dollar shortages that are taking place, the IMF is now actually issuing out loans in yuan, from what I understand. You see, this is not the dollar growing weak. This is the dollar growing strong. The more demand for dollars and the more that people hoard it, the stronger the dollar gets from it, right? People need those dollars to pay off their debts. Let's move on. Bloomberg, right? This is coming out of Bloomberg. It says this is talking about the Chinese central bank and the interest rates, right? Lower deposit rates may help support the yuan by making it less attractive for companies and consumers to convert their cash into dollars. Right? Again, this is coming out of Bloomberg. And what's happened there is that as the nation tries to support as China tries to stimulate the economy by lowering their interest rates, the interest rate on dollars is such an attractive, is at such an attractive level that the demand for dollar deposits, it's much higher than the yuan, so they cap the interest rates that they're willing to pay on these dollar deposits, right? And that's really what's going on there. They don't want them to take their cash and put it into a dollar deposit. They want them to put it in towards yuan, so they're capping the interest rates on it. Authorities are stepping up efforts to stabilize the nation's currency after it dropped toward the lowest level in 15 years against the greenback. Right? Does that sound like dollar weakness, or does it sound like dollar strength? King Dollar coming to destroy the world. Moving on, and this is again a quote coming out of Bloomberg. Chinese banks increased dollar deposit rates earlier this year to lure clients. Right? They were like, hey, we got these high interest rates, why don't you put it in there? As rising yields on the greenbacks boosted appeal of the dollar-denominated assets at the expense of the yuan securities. Everybody looked over and they were like, man, these dollar deposits pay so much more than the yuan. They started flooding into it and made the yuan too weak. All right, moving on. This is the Wall Street Journal. This is the quote coming out of the Wall Street Journal. The yuan weakness has been exacerbated recently by foreign investors. By foreign investors. I wrote this down. I have terrible handwriting. Okay, let's start over. The yuan weakness has been exacerbated recently by foreign investors pulling money from mainland China's stock market. More Chinese exporters are also choosing to hold onto U.S. dollars and other foreign currencies rather than convert them into yuan. removing one source of support for their currency. So we can see right there with these three articles that the demand for dollars is quite high. Much different from the idea that there's going to be this de-dollarization where everybody's getting out of the dollar, they don't want the dollar, and the dollar is going to be totally worthless. It is exactly the opposite of that. They are hoarding on to dollars. Dollars is what everybody wants. And if there is a lack of dollars out there to do international trade, they're going to come up with the next best solution, and that is to start dealing with their own sovereign currencies, or starting to deal with the currency of a nation like China, who has the biggest exports of anybody. So if you're going to deal in a currency that's not the US, you would have to deal with the one who is the biggest exporter, and that's why the yuan would be the next logical choice. But it's not working out too well for them, and it is working out really well for the greenback, the dollar strength, the United States dollar. But that's not great for our exports, right? Because every time our dollar strengthens, our exports become very difficult to try and distribute out there to the rest of the world. So what ends up happening is our manufacturing slows down because of that. That's one of the issues that we are now facing here. This is not it's not like the dollar is a great place to go, okay? That's not what I'm trying to get at all. The dollar will fail eventually. There is very little doubt in my mind, right? But the path to failure is not a straight downward hill slide, right? It's going to be a very bumpy road, and there is going to be times where the dollar strengthens much more than anybody would ever have anticipated. And the main reason for that is that there is so much debt due in dollars. There is far more debt in dollars than there is dollars to cover all that debt. So if you were to pay off all the debts, all the student loans, all the credit cards, all the car loans, house loans, government debt, you got rid of all that debt, right? The dollar would cease to exist, and you would still owe. See, think about that for a second. If people are trying to get out of the dollar, that means they're no longer going to be taking out dollar-denominated debt. And if they don't want to be in dollar-denominated debt, they have to get the dollars first in order to, offset their debts. Because most debts that are written around the world are due in dollars. And that puts a huge demand on dollars. One that is unlike any other currency out there. And when you think about how much currency really exists to how much debt there is, it makes me wonder if the Federal Reserve could even print at a pace that is fast enough to cover all that debt. You think about it. They asked Jerome Powell, think about this last thing, right? They asked Jerome Powell as the Federal Reserve was firing up the quantitative easing, and he was at a press conference, and they asked him, how much do you plan on printing? And his reply to that was, it depends on how much demand for our liabilities there are. Now you think about it, the Fed's liability is all the money that's out there. Their assets are like U.S. Treasuries, mortgage-backed securities, a little bit of gold, SDRs. This is what they have for assets. Their liability is all the money out there. So if it's the demand for their liabilities, it's the demand for cash, for the dollars. Now, if you have debts that are written around the world, massive amounts of them, debts that are written by countries, corporations, people have nothing to do with the United States, not part of our government, not part of our corporations, they're not part of the people, they're not part of the banking system, not part of any of that stuff. But yet they have written debts in dollars that are due in dollars. Okay? Now you think about it. When the demand for the Fed's liabilities to pay those debts, that's the demand that the Fed was talking about, what Jerome Powell was saying. It depends on how much demand for our liabilities there are. Think about all those debts around the world that have been written due in dollars. Now, that demand is way up here, but the supply is somewhere in here. The Fed tried to supply the debt, right? Tried to supply for the demand of liabilities out there. Now, they're trying to bring that demand down. De-dollarization, get out of it. That way, maybe somewhere they can find an equilibrium. That's really how I see it. You look at these articles down in there. Read these articles. Does this sound very much like the dollar destruction has taken place? It sounds like dollar hoarding to me. It sounds like dollar... Mrs. Ashley just jumped in front of the window. But this sounds more like dollar strength. It sounds more like dollar hoarding. It sounds more like people are trying to get into the dollar to stash it away and hold on to it than it does sound like to me that they're trying to get out of the dollar because they don't like it. Like, they may not like it, and it doesn't matter of a like or not like. It's a matter of what is the better currency and which one is being held onto and which one is being used. All right, think about that. Uneducated economist, you let me know.